It's been nearly 3 years since U.S. Army Master Sergeant Jeremy Burris was killed in a motorcycle versus SUV accident in Maryland. He was only 37 years old. Burris grew up in Crown Point, and now his family has found a way to honor his memory and help out the next young leader from their community who wants to get into public service. I recently spoke with his brother and sister about their new scholarship fund and how they want Jeremy's memory to live on.
Tell me about your brother.
Jeremy was Jeremy was a very special person. He was the light of any room. So he was a very, very hard worker, incredible leader. But he also was the prankster, the person that had the biggest laugh in the room, and it was unmistakable.
Jason, did he always want to be a soldier? I mean, when you're a lifeguard and you're a disciplined young kid, I guess being a soldier kind of fits the mold, right?
Yeah, when we were younger, of course, being twin brothers, we just pushed each other all the time to try and be better. And Jeremy just had a drive for heroic things. He had some challenges as a young child with some things, and he became a lifeguard. And from that day forward, he just really wanted to show his skills, his bravery, and he held really strong onto his integrity. Standing behind everything that he did, whether it was right or wrong, but he would find a way through it. So yeah, it was no surprise when we got older in school that we both decided to kind of go our separate ways. But I think his calling to be a soldier was always in his future.
Vera, did he go to college to get to his associate's degree and then sign up for the Army? Did he do both at the same time? How did that play out?
So officially, yes, he did first get his associates and then he enlisted. It was on his mind even before he graduated high school. I think he had been thinking about it. And, with some guidance was sort of, maybe given or asked to think about just making sure that was the right decision. So he went to college, and I still remember he called me and said, "I'm not really sure yet how to tell mom and dad, but I just did this thing." And I'm like, "What did you just do?" But he was so excited. He's like, I've wanted to do this for so long. And he was just there was so much joy, like when he was telling me about it. So I don't think he had a single regret.
Jason, he was very proud to have served his country for so many years.
He was very proud. Jeremy had stepped up numerous times, even during his deployment, to show, his bravery and courage. And I just think that, there was something in him that was deep, a meaningful thing, that just, I think he wanted to challenge his character and what he could be. And he knew that the only place he could do that was to serve his country and show the world what he had.
He served in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and he was an explosive ordnance disposal specialist. I mean, that's not the easiest job to have, is it?
No, it is not. No,
Yeah.
it is. It is definitely the most scariest one to know that your brother's going out there and putting on a bomb suit and disarming bombs. I mean, anything from small things to could be large, could be anything up to a nuke. But he did it with a lot of pride.
Sierra, was that in his character to take on like the tough tasks?
Yes. Jeremy was fearless. He was also a bit of a rule follower, unlike a little bit of his siblings, but I think he really was incredibly brave. I think he always showed up, and that bravery showed up in different ways. Obviously, as a soldier, he did many things there that were incredibly brave, and I think he was recognized for that formally. But even just in spite of troubles or things Jason alluded to earlier with just with the childhood, I think always showing up with that smile, and he just had this light I think that was also, right, just a sign of bravery, right? Like just willingness to battle whatever was going on and just show up as your best self.
He served 18 years in the U.S. Army. What were his plans after service? Was he thinking about, after 20 years or after 25 years? What were his plans?
He had discussed a couple of things, but honestly, he wanted to take a year break, and reflect on himself, and look back on his career. And I think he just wanted to spend time with his children. And in a time of, and if he was still here, he could have, he would have been able to take the time and reflect back on his life, what he did for his country. And he never really gave us any big plans, but I think he would have stayed in the military a little bit longer than 20.
How did you all come up with the idea to honor him like this?
Well, I
Either,
think, yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it off and on, and I think, there's a lot of kind of healing and emotions, after his loss because it was just so unexpected. But we had really from early on been talking about like, what do we want to do to make sure that Jeremy's legacy continues, right? And that light I talked about, that really make sure that that continues and just doesn't go away. And so we've been talking for a while about this, and I think thanks to Jason, he really helped orchestrate and start to pull some of these things together with the school. And we always knew that it was going to be some sort of leadership-based award because of just Jeremy's, incredible character and the leadership that I think he really carried in everything he did, right? So we always knew those things. I think it was just sort of like the perfect timing of, okay, we need to do this now and take it from idea to action.
and now that you have, what is the goal as far as raising funds? I know you all have raised a couple $1,000s so far. How quickly are you going to turn this around for a graduating senior there at Crown Point?
We would like, I mean, we're starting this scholarship. This will be the first year. The scholarship is going to select 2 recipients. And our goal is to raise enough funds to make this last as long as we possibly can to keep his legacy alive. But not only that, just empower future leaders to step up, be proud about their childhood, be proud about the foundations that they have created in their hometowns, and then what they plan on doing to continue that leadership. And if we can help somebody that's also going into a public service type of field, we're all about making more Jeremys. That's for sure.
Yeah. Sarah, what do you think he would think of this effort to give back to the community like this?
I think he would say, "Oh, you're making too big of a deal. Like it's not." It's. I think he would. I think he'd be, honored and humbled by it. But I think he would think we're probably making a too big of a deal. Um, yeah, I think this is really special also because, Jeremy had this quote that he put up, and it really just kind of stuck with us all. And it's actually um, on his gravestone. But it's be the light that you want to see in the world. And so I think just in a world there's a lot of uncertainty and things happening that I think, encouraging people to stand up and be strong individuals and embrace leadership qualities like this, I think is just so, so important. So I know that he would love us carrying that forward.
If you'd like to learn more about Jeremy, you can go to Facebook, search Celebrating Jeremy Burris. There's a page there. We wish the family the best as they raise the initial funds for this scholarship.